If you're thinking about tanking in Midnight Mythic Plus, it's the fastest way to get into keys, but it's also the most difficult thing to play. Hope you guys are doing well. If you've ever thought about swapping a tank, or just you're tired of sitting in LFG for an hour at DPS, then this video is for you. Today I'm really just gonna be breaking down the real pros and cons of tanking in Midnight for Mythic Plus players. Starting with the pros, pro number one is that tanks are just scarce in general. You're the star of the show. People want you. People need you. Um, and obviously, as a tank, you're just going to get into groups almost immediately. You can log in and at times get into a group literally within a minute. And that alone is more than enough reason for some people to just swap to it immediately. Pro number two is you basically control the flow of the dungeon. So you set the pace, the pulls, the route, everything. If you like being in control, tanking is easily the most satisfying role in the game. But this pro also has its cons, which we'll get into. Pro number three. You have the most impact in on the key. A good tank can either destroy a key or can hard carry a key. Clean pulls, proper route, proper cooldown usage, good positioning can really make a run feel smooth, even if the DPS are kind of lacking. As long as the tank pulls well and everyone lives, you can easily time a key. And then pro number four is that it's the easiest way to climb IO. This is kind of just like a fact. If you're pugging, the tanking is the easiest way to climb. You know, if your goal is to push IO, especially again if you're pugging, and tanking is the fastest way to do it. You'll get invited more often, you'll run more keys, and you'll climb faster than most DPS pugs. And then the fifth and final pro, which is, in my opinion, it's more of my opinion than an objective fact, but I think that tanking is significantly more engaging. It's not just your DPS rotation; you're thinking about positioning, interrupts, defensives, and mitigation, maximizing your cooldowns as well as your healer's cooldowns. Your DPS's cooldowns. So I think it's a lot more engaging. You have a lot more to think about throughout the key. Now let's talk about the cons that most people don't tell you about before you begin tanking. Con number one is that this is actually kind of funny because it applies to healers as well, but everything is your fault. You know, if something goes wrong, it's on you for the most part. Doesn't matter if the DPS missed a kick or if like they stood in something or if they died into a pull that they're not used to, you're probably going to get blamed more often than not. Um, Con number two is that there's just kind of a lot of knowledge that you need to have, which for some players can be more of like a knowledge overload. They can get overwhelmed by it very easily, which is kind of going back to pro number two about controlling the dungeon. This is basically the other side of that coin where you need to know everything. That includes routes, mob abilities, tank smashes, how much you can pull without dying, how to optimally pull around not only your defensive so that you can survive the pull, but as well as the DPS players' offensive CDs to, like maximize their damage, which in turn maximizes how fast the actual dungeon, you guys run through it. So con number three, sorry about that, is toxicity. This one's pretty vague, but tanking in pugs can just be rough in general. People expect you to know the exact route that they want or that they saw on stream, even if they don't say anything before the key starts. Like I can't even tell you how many times like a DPS pug has complained about the tank not knowing some new crazy tech or new crazy pull that they saw on like a YouTube video or a stream less than a day ago or something. And like if you don't confirm that before the key, then that's on them. But trust me, they will not think that. They will 100% put on the tank. Con number four, kind of similar to number three, there's no room for mistakes. You know, this also is kind of partially within the toxicity, but one bad pull, one missed defensive, or even like bad positioning or an accidental, like, oh, we accidentally grab one more mob, the key can basically be over immediately. The margin for error in this expansion is very small, and this is amplified even more if you are not playing Brewmaster, because in my opinion, it is significantly more forgiving than any other tank, which kind of ties in with con number five, is that it's very mentally draining to some people. You're always thinking ahead. So for some people that it can be very engaging, for some people it can be very draining. It can be very taxing on them. because you're constantly thinking like it's not a role where you can just kind of chill and be like, oh yeah, this is an easy pull, like nothing's going on. You know, you're kind of constantly evaluating the situation, thinking about, all right, what's the next pull? Do I chain this pull? Do we have the cooldowns to do enough damage for this pull? Do I have the cooldowns to live this pull? You have to really be thinking about, especially now without some of these add-ons that we used to have and weak auras, it's kind of a lot more difficult to even understand when you can do that. So that's about it for the pros and cons. So it's really up to you now. Like, is tanking worth it in Midnight? Taking Mythic Plus, in my opinion, can be the most rewarding thing in the game, but to some people, it can also be the most stressful. If you want those fast queue times, control over the dungeon, and kind of the ability to carry your own keys, then I think tanking's for you. But if you don't want pressure, responsibility, or dealing with higher expectations, especially in pugs, then it might not be for you. But if you're thinking about swapping the tank, drop a comment. Tell me what spec or class you're considering, and if you're into more Mythic Plus tips, tank and DPS gameplay content, make sure to like and subscribe. Good luck in your vaults, guys, and as usual, have a great one.